Hello, welcome. Welcome to the Division of Performing Arts Sound Dialogue Series. I'd like to start by thanking Patrick Rivers, who founded this series. I'll also thank all of the students and faculty who helped to plan this event. I'm happy to introduce to you to our panel of 4 remarkable music industry experts: Jim Corona, Elizabeth Freund, Michael Connor, and Jesse Lautner. Jim Corona, who will serve as the moderator of our panel this afternoon, has worked during his incredible career as a road manager, sound engineer, backline tech, stagehand, sound designer, and venue production coordinator. He's best known for his work with Paul Simon in multiple capacities from 1990 to present. Other artists he's worked with include Sting, Bonnie Raitt, and Andrew Lloyd Webber. Jim currently works at the Broadway production of Chicago and serves as sound show key at the sound reinforcement company, Sound Associates in New York. Previous theatrical technician work includes Moving Out and The Cape Men. Before passing the conversation to Jim, who will introduce today's panel of music industry powerhouses, I'm delighted to welcome the university president, Steve Kaplan, to the conversation.
Thank you, Erica, and welcome to all of our students and our faculty that are joining us, and of course our staff and our 4 panelists in particular. Jim, thank you for being the moderator, and I thank all of you, the 4 of you, for joining us, for volunteering your time. It's an incredibly powerful program we have in music and sound recording. It's nationally and frankly even internationally recognized. Some of the best students on the campus are enrolled in the program. And the very best of them, as you probably know, spend a semester at Blackbird in Memphis doing remarkable work there. I remember a few years ago, I was walking onto campus the first day of classes, kind of walking around, and there were 4 students in front of our iconic building, Maxey Hall, taking a picture of one another. And I always ask students when I go up and speak with them why they chose, they were freshmen, why they chose the University of New Haven and what other schools did they look at, and what did we offer that the other schools didn't offer? And all 4 of them had been accepted to Berkeley and Boston, and all 4 had chosen us. That tells you a lot about this program. The only other thing I want to say to you is not just panelists in music and sound recording, but as individuals that have come here to help our students learn more about the work that you do in helping them become better at what they want to do, is the students at the University of New Haven are a special group. A third of our students are first generation. A third of them are Pell Grant recipients, meaning coming from very challenging financial circumstances, and at a private school with our tuition rates, that's a pretty big number. And we're the most racially diverse private school and one of the most racially diverse schools in the state of Connecticut. So they come to us with high need, they come to us with incredible talent, and we graduate them going off into amazingly successful careers. So I know they're all looking forward to hearing from you, so I'm going to turn it back over to Erica and Jim. And I look forward to the program. I have been living on Zoom, and I just got a call that I have to get on another Zoom. So I'm going to listen for a few minutes, and then unfortunately, I'm zooming off to the next Zoom. Thanks.
Erica, you're muted.
Muted. To everyone in the audience, please post your questions in the Q&A portion of this webinar. For our students, the panelists have requested that you post your name, your major, the position you aspire to in the future, and your question. Without further ado, Jim Corona.
Hey guys, thanks for having us, Erica. The first thing I wanted to say is a couple of ground rules. So if you want to send a question in, please do it in this format. Use caps for the person you'd like to ask the question to. So if it was for me, do Jim in caps. And then what your name is in caps, what your focus department is, music industry, sound recording, music department, and then where do you plan to work, where you'd like to work in the industry, and then drop your question in. Okie doke. Here's another set of ground rules that I'd like to observe. The panelists are, they have their own thing, but I'd like to avoid gossipy stuff like, asking us about artists that we've worked with. Ask us about what we do. And if it relates to that, that's great. We're going to try to avoid questions about the virus. We're not from the CDC. We're here to talk about the music business. And then avoid bad language. That's mostly a note for myself because I still swear and I don't want to do that in front of you guys today. Okie doke. So The first thing I'd like to do is we're going to do quick intros of who we, what we were, where we work and that kind of thing. Erica did mine, so I don't need to go on and on. Two of the panelists and I have worked together, and one of them introduced me to another who I've built a friendship because of our neighborhood in New York. So that's the collection of how the four of us came together. Real quick, I just want to say, I'm a blue collar kid. I grew up on Long Island. I played in public school music. I guess I started like 8 or 9 years old, with a drum pad and a pair of sticks. I was a drummer. I went into private lessons, which led to becoming a member of a big band as a drummer. And then in high school, big band and marching band, which led me into going into the military as a musician. I did 3 years in the military. And during that time, I spent a lot of time with a pair of AKG 414s and a quarter track tape machine and got the bug for that. And I went to Institute of Audio Research right out of the service. So from there on, I've worked an assortment of jobs because they had job placement, which I thought was amazing. From there, I ended up working in technical publishing at an old magazine that doesn't exist anymore called DB Magazine. I worked in quality control at a new age music place, which doesn't exist anymore. And then ended up in New York City working at SIR, which is a musical instrument rental house. And then they had a pro rehearsal division. And I got in from driving trucks to studios all around New York to working because I had some mixing experience in the rehearsal department. And this was all low wage. This was like $6, $7 an hour, maybe at the time. And that led to working closely with big artists at SIR's rehearsal facilities. And that slowly led to a little bit of touring work. And this led to meeting someone who was working for Paul Simon at the time. And I was in my late 20s, and he was managing African groups because he was a manager for Ladysmith Black Mabazo. He was managing other groups, and he asked this favor of me as just an employee of SIR. Hey, I got a really big showcase for another African group. Can you come in and mix it for me? And I'll owe you a big favor. He didn't have a lot of money. So I said, sure. I did him the favor. I knew he worked for Paul, and I thought, this is a good favor to have. And I didn't have an expectation. I did my best on the job. He thanked me, and we didn't talk about it again. About a year and a half later, maybe a year later, I was working for the rock group Living Color as a drum tech. And I ended up going on a little tour with them. At the end of that, I ended up getting a call from a fellow who worked also at SIR, who had a serious problem in his family, and he was the standing drum tech for Paul on the 2 Graceland tours. He called me and said, "Hey, can I recommend you to the Paul Simon camp? I can't do this big tour." And I was like, "Sure, I got a tour." And so he passed my message. He passed my name to the fella who I actually had done that favor for as a recommendation. So that recommendation plus the recommendation of the guy who wanted to replace me replace himself with me was a favorable outcome. And that's how I ended up in the Paul Simon camp. I took the job and then that was it. I was launched with Paul, but at that point I was really entry level in a lot of ways in the touring industry. I was very inexperienced. I had only done 2 little tours before that, but once I got the job, I had to keep the job and do my best. It was a lot of, serendipity and, evidently I knew what to do because I didn't get fired, and I lasted quite a long time and even left for a while and have come back successfully, which is even more remarkable. So, and as you heard in the bio that Erica read, I've done a wide array of things. Now, what's funny is that I have a lot of audio engineering experience, but I can tell you I've only mixed small shows for Paul. You'll see Michael Connors on the screen. In the Paul Simon camp, we affectionately call him Coach. He mixes Paul's big tours. Like, he is an arena size and stadium engineer. He's adept and skilled and has been a long time. So I just wanted to clarify that role, that I have mixed a show for Paul when there's 300 people. coach has mixed it when it's, a couple 100,000 people. And there's a very big difference in those skill sets. So that's also a nice way to see scale of what engineering is as far as live. I evolved the backline stuff because I've done a lot of backline stuff, which is, roadie stuff for the musicians. I happen to have New York experience as a stagehand, and because of my knowledge of instrument stuff, that has evolved to this current job. I'm the main sub for the props guy on Chicago, not audio, which is surprising to some folks, but props is backline is considered props in theater. So instruments come under the heading of props or property. And so that's one of the reasons I'm doing that. That was also an association with a friend of mine who I've done engineering with and done design and sound work and even audio installation at home with. So I have a lot of different experience, and it all threads together. And it also speaks to my willingness. I'm willing to learn something new. I'm willing to approach something different that I haven't done before. And generally, I'm watching my time. One of the things about that is just rolling up my sleeves and saying, well, if you're willing to hire me, I'm willing to hustle. And so that's something I bring to this job is that I'm willing to do what it takes. So I want to hand it over. I first of all want to thank this panel because they're really dynamic and just good-natured people, and have done this in a lot of ways, for all the right reasons, just to be good-natured and of service to our industry, which you guys are going to graduate and become a part of. So, it's also one of those philosophies I talk about as a good camper. You leave the campground nicer than you found it. This is payback to, how we were treated in some ways, maybe not this well, but anyway, so at 22, I didn't know, how this was going to work, but I had the passion and I had the desire and I followed it. And so I'm gonna leave with you. I'm gonna introduce you to Jesse, and I'm gonna have each of the panelists talk a little bit about the arc of their career, where they were at 22, how they knew they were gonna be able to pay their bills in the music industry, and then when they got to a really big gig. And so first up is Jesse Lautner. And Jesse, give us a couple of things about what you did and how you got here.
Hi guys, first off, congratulations, and it's an honor to be here, so thanks for inviting me, Jim. So my background is I call myself a music producer, but my background is in engineering and mixing in studios and for live. My trajectory, I started working in recording studios when I was 14 years old, so I had a pretty big head start. I was very passionate about the art of, making records from a very early age, and I kind of knew that I wanted to do that. I'm a guitar player, and I started playing instruments when I was really young, but I started interning at studios when I was in high school, and from that I went to recording school, like your institution. I went to New York University and I graduated from there. And while I was at school, I was working with bands and trying to record albums while I was a student. And fortunately was working with a band that got a good amount of attention, got picked up. They were called the Low Anthem. They're not that active anymore, but they're actually based out of Rhode Island, not far from Connecticut. And from that, that was sort of like a springboard for me to, build my career off of that, because the record that I did for them got a pretty significant amount of press, really amazing reviews, a lot of best of lists around that time. And this was the first band that I ever actually recorded. So I feel really lucky and grateful that I got my, my career started with that group, but also at the same time, it was, a lot of preparation, a lot of work, and a lot of, studying on my end. And from there, I've been active in studios, a lot of mixing at home. You're actually in my studio right now. I'm looking at my monitors. I wish I could flip my camera, but that'd be too difficult. But on top of that, I've also worked as a film director as well for music documentaries and concert films. I've been very passionate about music films. They've become more popular recently, and I love music history. That's sort of it's what I've always just been very passionate about. I love old music, yeah, music from the 60s and 70s, and I've been also lucky to work with some of my idols as well. I also keep some work outside of the music world, even though it's connected in production. I oversee production, sound and visual production for a synagogue in Midtown Manhattan, and maybe at some point we could talk about that. So I do also keep a part-time day job, and I have my reasons for that as well. So I'll pass it back to you, Jim. I hope that's a good amount of information.
Thanks, Jesse. We're going to go next to Coach Mike Connor.
Hey, how you doing? So I started out a lot like Jim did. I started out recording my buddies' bands in Colorado when I was about 12. And that was my experience with a reel-to-reel machine, and realized I kind of enjoyed that. So I ended up going from there to a school in Los Angeles, California when I was about 18 years old, called the Los Angeles Recording Institute, or actually Recording Workshop. I think it's gone now. And they offered a little associate's degree. There weren't very many classes or universities you could go to at the time to get this type of degree. And was there for about 2 weeks. Was supposed to be there for 9 weeks in school, and I made it 2 weeks before I had a job in a studio when I left. I came back and took all my final exams because they looked good in the brochure that I was working. But that's kind of where I started. I worked in LA rooms, learned a lot there, and then came back to Texas, where I was originally from, and just to visit, and ended up mixing a musical theater production, which I'd never done before, and loved it. And so I kind of hung out and started doing that. Did that in the summer. It was a summer stock thing. Ended up buying a bunch of gear, started renting them their equipment, and had a company for a while. Did that. Then next thing I just went back to touring. I enjoyed touring. I did some theater work. I was a house audio guy at a performing arts facility for a while. And I just went back into touring, and a buddy of mine was mixing Paul Simon. You know, it's something you do these big tours with all these acts, and he was leaving and said, hey, you want to mix this? And I started mixing Paul Simon. That was about 10 years ago. Well, a little more than that now, about 11. But and here we are. So I mixed Paul Simon, Steely Dan, and it's kind of the same sort of thing. You kind of have to do everything. So anyway, that's it. I don't know what else to say.
Elizabeth, you're muted.
Hi, yes, sorry. Hi, thanks. Good to hear everybody. And Jim, thanks for inviting me to be part of this. And hi, students. I wish I had something like this when I started my career. I started actually when I was in college. I studied visual art. I'm from a family of painters and sculptors and photographers and filmmakers, and I grew up loving music. Music was a necessity to me. In fact, I was listening to something today and I was thinking it still is. You know, certain songs, certain, I'm still a voracious, passionate fan. And that's where it started for me as a kid. I studied visual art and art history in college, graduated with my passion for music intact, and just started banging around the industry to see what would be a good fit. I had no idea. I had no connections whatsoever in the music industry. So what did that look like? It looked like interning at radio stations. One was at a college I went to, another was in upstate New York. It meant sweeping floors at a recording studio at night. I took the night shift and I'd answer phones and kind of linger outside the recording studios. And sometimes the engineers would invite me in and tell me this, that, the other. I basically did anything and everything. And I DJ'd, I freelance DJ'd in the Catskills, which was a trip. I worked at a record store, and I gotta tell you, I loved every single job I had. I was so curious, I still am. I remember when I'd have to file the vinyl at the record store, the smell, like it's a vanilla smell that the cardboard makes. I mean, I'm one of those diehard passion freaks about music and all of its industry. I noticed, I felt like I needed a more reliable job. This is in my mid-20s, and I looked at the spines of all my records, and the bulk of them came from 75 Rockefeller Plaza. They were Atlantic Records, they were Elektra, they were Geffen, and in those years, we're talking mid-'80s, everybody was at 75 Rock, and you could just walk in. This is way pre-9/11. And so I brought a resume with me. It was black velvet, written in silver pen. And I got in the elevator and I hit every floor. And at every floor, I dropped my resume with the receptionist. And when I got in the elevator after one of these drops, a guy was standing there and he said, "You know that that's going straight in the trash, right?" And he said, "What you need to do is go to the 24th floor, ask for Virginia, and tell her Chris sent you." So I did. And the 24th floor was the temp agency that serviced the entire building. I took a typing test. That's how long ago this was. And sorry about that noise. That's going to be my dog. Don't know how to stop her. And don't drink. Sorry, honey. I took a typing test, and the next day I had a job at Atlantic Records in the inventory department. And from the inventory department, I heard about a job in the A&R department at Geffen Records. And the inventory department, because I didn't know, and you probably don't either, at that time it meant if the publicist or the promo team needed to order product, it went through my computer, and I ordered X amount of product with a promo stamp on it, or bandsawed or drilled. It's really dating me. Anyway, A&R sounded much more exciting. And so I interviewed at Geffen Records and got a job at Geffen Records. I was the assistant, and there were only 5 people on the East Coast of New York. We were launching, sorry, there goes the dog again, what can I tell you? The bands we were launching, and this is 1986, 1987, Guns N' Roses, Joni Mitchell just had Chalk Mark in a Rainstorm, Jimmy Page, Outrider. These were my idols, and they were also my peers who I just adored. And from there, I went into publicity. It wasn't, took a little time out, a little sidebar in my case, to get sober. And I say that because a lot of times in this business, it is centered around bars, and it is centered around places where we've seen a lot of our fellow artists and fellow industry follow that road and die. And so for me, it's important to kind of stake my claim on that and let you know that that's how my path went, because it played a major role in the next chapter. After I got sober, I got a job at a publicity firm. I knew absolutely nothing about public relations. Less than 6 weeks into the job, I was on a tour bus with Ringo Starr. And Ringo got sober exactly a month before I did. So I knew absolutely nothing about who the writer at the New York Times was or anything about publicity. What I did know and what I cared about was staying sober and doing the best I could with the tools I had. And that has pretty much been my blueprint moving forward. It isn't always about, I studied visual art in college. I didn't study public relations. What I did was I've acted with integrity to the best of my ability. I also put my sobriety first, which for a lot of people, this job wants the job to be first. And in some ways it is, because it is my first love. Music is absolutely my first love. But if, as we say, we don't put the oxygen mask on us first, we won't survive the long haul. I started working in this field in 1988, and I'm still in it. And I'm still working with the same clients that I started with then. Worked with Ringo the whole journey. And I've had the honor of working with Linda McCartney. At the PR firm I was at, after 5 years, I got promoted as vice president. And in 1994, I started my own firm. When I went on my own, the Beatles, I got to work with the Beatles, the company, their company, Apple and Neil Aspinall. We did projects like the Beatles anthology. We launched Cirque du Soleil Love. I got to represent George individually. I toured twice with Paul McCartney, and Linda McCartney was my first client when I went out on my own. I've had a blessed career. But again, I truly believe that it comes more from putting the things I think are important about life and sustaining life than putting everything else first. And that's why I say it. So don't be afraid to, as you go looking for the career you want and the people you want to work for, avoid people pleasing. Work your butt off. Do your best, but be who you are. It's really important. And you'll be tempted to let it go because celebrity is very attractive and powerful and seductive, and a lot of us have fallen prey to it. So anyway, I think that answers the question. If I left anything out, we can do it in follow-up.
Thanks, Elizabeth. That was fantastic. So I'm going to expedite a little bit. So what I want to do is go a little bit more on short answer, just because I want to make sure we get in as much as we can. So I wrote this topic, serendipity, because there are moments where I described where I fell into. It feels like I fell into the job, but I had to make the job work. So I'm gonna throw this one to Coach. Just like you mentioned, doing the community theater. What was the bridge from like the community theater gig to, mixing a big show? And don't forget to tell them about the NFL, because I think that's awesome.
Oh, yeah. I think you, so many times I've thought about how do you draw this map out, and it's a very difficult map to draw. I think what you do is similar to what Elizabeth was saying, things like that. You just try and do the best job you can at whatever the job is in front of you for the day. I started in LA. I got my job in Los Angeles. They were looking for a girl. I went to the interview and they were looking for a girl to answer the phones and also be the second engineer. And I, without hesitation, said, "Oh, that's great. I know 3 or 4 girls in my class. I'll go back and let them know to come interview." And I hadn't gotten home maybe 5 minutes and the phone rang and they said, "You got the gig." And I said, "I thought you're looking for a girl." And they said, "Well, it's unusual for somebody to be that noble in LA, so we'd rather have you." And so they're okay, great. So it's back to being true to who you are. It pays off. Then I went on and I did the musical theater stuff. I did a lot of country music at the time in Texas. I started mixing that. I would rent the equipment out, and the artist would usually not be traveling with an engineer, and so I'd end up mixing those shows. And I did a lot of major artists there. I ended up with Ray Price for quite a while. And you bounce around. You do a lot of things. I would say that my career didn't start to solidify until I was probably in my late 30s. It was sort of all over the place up until that moment. And then it just started. Then I got pretty solid about what I wanted to do. So, yeah. If I left something out there, I don't know. I've kind of lost where I was going with that. But
that was good. I'm going to jump to Jesse real quick, but I will come back to you because I did mention the NFL. So think about that one.
You got it.
Jesse.
Re-ask the question for me, Jim. Sorry.
It was the jump from like smaller gigs to, wow, this is a big gig. Now I'm there. Now I got a resume item. Like that little, what was the gig before? And then, holy cow, I actually am doing this.
It's funny. I've sort of felt like my whole career has been this sort of balance between maintaining both. I don't think any small gig is beneath me even now. Like I said in my introduction, I worked with the band that got signed actually to a pretty major label. And that was the first band I worked with, and I went on to work with other major artists, develop projects that were, major label projects. And all the while, I was still, working in venues in New York and also even at some House of Worship gigs too. The reason why I maintained that work is when I'm 33 years old, and when I was graduating, it was sort of the period where if you wanted to be a producer, engineer, mixer, it was very tough to make it at that age unless you had your own studio or if you really struck gold and really had a big hit. And I really, I put a premium on living in New York City. I didn't want to live in a small town. I didn't want to move to Nashville. I didn't connect with Nashville. I really wanted to stay in New York. I love New York. So, and I basically, was living 2 lives, and I still sort of am as well. I keep my smaller, mixed production gigs, but I also was working with bands as well, whether I would have to take off time with my other work or do it in the nights. I made that balance work for myself, and in different ways, different and I don't need to go into the details of all the different venues I've worked in, but for me, it was just sort of building the network that allowed me to do all my different creative endeavors that I have, fortunately have been able to do and successfully do. I have a very strong passion for people and meeting people. I love people, and not for the sake of trying to get a leg up in the world. I often say, it's probably for me like my personal biggest asset is that I really just love connecting with people. I get that from my grandmother. I know where I come from. My grandmother was a community builder, and I try to work on projects and do things that I feel like connect people, whether it's bringing on, connecting different musicians with each other, like if a band needs a bass player, or doing very large scale concerts where I bring a lot of people together for a night and we pay tribute to an artist. That to me is where, my, real passions lie in my work. I hope that answers the question. And honestly, I'm still figuring it out too, and we can get into that as well. It's every day it's not a struggle. It's a task to try to, make yourself better, improve yourself, always working on the art too. Don't forget that this is an art that we're working in. So I'll leave it there, Jim.
Thanks, Jesse. Elizabeth, I'm going to skip you on this one because I think you made a really clear point in that with that whole resume and the elevator and then that process. So I'm going to jump on because I also had a heading of positive vibe. If you students aren't catching that the four of us have a positive vibe, we're going to have a do-over, because all of us have this innate nature for just getting along with people and knowing who we are inside of that. So in a certain way, we're kind of blessed with this, but it's a part of the job that helps facilitate getting more jobs. So if you're grumpy, it used to work really good in the 70s and 80s to be a grumpy sound guy. It doesn't work the same anymore. So I'm seeing some questions. Keep sending me the questions because I'm going to funnel them to different panelists. So I see some questions and I'm going to jump on because the next thing I wanted to talk about was job behavior and our unusual HR. So if you don't know what HR is, I think you know what HR is, you guys. Human resources. So all of us do have this innate sense of recruiting behind us. So if one of you students is on a job with me, I'm watching these things. So I'm just going to list off a couple of things that are really pertinent to me. So one of them is read the room, right? Don't be a drag. Come to work rested, fed, and prepared. Have the right clothes on, have the right tools if you're required to have tools. Have notes. When I do Chicago, I still have notes in front of me. I've been at this 30 plus years. I don't want to screw up. I know I can make a mistake. So I do the things that help me along. My attitude, I'm please and thank you. I have kids. I taught my kids as nursery school kids, please and thank you really advance you in nursery school. They really, really advance you in the music business. So I'm just going to throw this to the panel about preparation for a job and what you see. Like when you look over your shoulder and somebody new is working with you, I've seen this at sound companies. I've seen this on jobs where, third stage manager on a big TV gig is somebody like these students right out of school who just, managed to get in. So speak to the new person you see on a job next to you, maybe on their first job. Let's start with Jesse this time.
It's a great question. I mean, honestly, the work that hopefully you guys have been doing in school leaves you to be prepared for any situation. What I love to see is just someone who's comfortable and proactive. I can't stress that enough. Whether it's a production assistant engineer, someone who is like just sitting there texting on their phone on a gig, like I'm not going to be thrilled to work with you again. my favorite thing is when I go to a venue and I'm, even if I'm like seeing a band, just checking them out, and the mix is just awful, and I look at the back of the room and it's a young, young man or woman who's very clearly out of school, and they're just like not focused on the band, and they're just looking at their phone. I know we're all tempted to look at this thing. I have a problem with it too, but when you're working, you better not be. And I think that's something to just always keep in mind. And so if you're proactive, and like if you're like, for example, at a mixing console, like Michael, Jim, or myself, and you're listening, like that's why you're there. That's why you're doing the job. And the benefit of being open and being receptive to the creative energy that's happening between you and the artist, whether it's in a live setting, whether it's in a studio, whether it's on creating marketing materials for your next show. It doesn't matter. It's all about creative energy flow, and if you're not paying attention, then it's not going to work out for you. So just be proactive, be receptive. Don't be overly proactive. People don't like it when someone's like, hammering you, but if you need to hammer the artist and try to get them to do something, like that's great too. Be a motivator as well when necessary or when called for. But yeah, that's my 2 cents on that topic, Jim.
All right, Elizabeth, same question.
I feel like it's really been answered. Everything you've both said is pretty much the same. What I would say in my industry is a lot of the people I work for are moving very, very quickly. And they're not going to stop and tell you point by point what needs to get done. They're just going to get and go do it. And you have to be incredibly intuitive, persistent, and smart on your feet to go figure out what to do and do it, and be useful. So for me, I look for people that are self-starters, organized, useful, passionate, and prepared. I love what you said about being prepared too. In my industry, when I interview people, it's amazing how often people come unprepared. They haven't looked at my website. When they haven't listened to the most recent records of the bands that I represent. Do your homework. And pursue what you're passionate about. Go for an interview with a job where you really do want to work, not just to get the notch on the resume. So follow your passions, have integrity, and be prepared.
Thanks. Coach Mike Connor, same question.
I'll just say what Elizabeth just said. If you're passionate about this, you're going to go a long way. And just pay attention to what's happening around you. Just be aware of what's going on. A lot of the questions you might have get answered just by being observant. And then we all at least if you're going to talk about what I pretty much do primarily, and that's touring audio. We travel together, we work together, we pretty much sleep in the same tour bus, we're on the same planes together, we're seeing each other order the same food every day. It's just you just need to be a nice person and really like hanging out with people, and you'll go a long way. In fact, you can go a long way with mediocre technical skills if you're really good with people. Because this is a people industry. It's not so much, you can be the best guy in the world at whatever, or gal or whatever, at whatever the particular task is in touring or concerts or etc. That doesn't guarantee you that you're going to be recognized for that. What will get you there is being just being a genuine nice person who likes other people and really enjoys being at work every day. That's because it's a challenging job. So if you're having a bad time or a bad month or so, it's not a great time to be on the road with 20 people that you may not like as much as home. So you really have to have a good attitude. And it's an interesting thing. I like Elizabeth's pretty much nailed it there. So
yeah, I'd agree. Thanks. I'm going to jump because I want to get to some of the questions. I'm sending the questions, just so you students know, the questions that I'm seeing on the Q&A, I'm sending directly to the panelists you may have asked about, so that the question is kind of under their hands for, kind of quick answers to some of your questions. So keep sending the questions. I'm watching. So I have this subtext, and I want to go quickly through this. Contacts, friendships, networking, and peers. So I know this, and I've kind of done this with Coach, where we can be on 2 different tours at the same time, but staying in touch with each other about a 3rd tour. So he could be out with Steely Dan. I was out with Trey Anastasio, but we could be texting each other about what would be coming up with Paul Simon. And so in the context of that, I'm throwing all these big names at you. But if one of you is working at McDonald's and one of you is working at Burger King, but you have, a soccer team in common, stay in touch with each other. I know that doesn't seem proportional, but this is how we build the networks, where we like each other and we like, hey, you heard Coach talk about, he recommended somebody else for the job, and just by the act of kindness got the job. So learn to value each other and learn to build these friendships, because I have friends in their late 50s who are as close to their college friends today as they were when they were in the dorms. So this is important to value and expend. So if there's anything that you guys would like to throw in really quickly on that, as far as networking in real time and how you expand, that kind of thing. So I think I find out about jobs this way, and then I'll even find out about a job, like you said, Coach, and refer it off. So I'll start with you again on that, just like, the way our network works.
It's interesting. It just slowly builds in your career, especially if if this is what you want to do. What'll end up happening is you'll wake up one day and you kind of know everybody. But but you do have to. It's back to being a people person and liking people, though. That's how you build those networks. And the other thing that's funny too is you need to stay relevant. And staying relevant doesn't mean you sit at home and you don't do, or I don't do anything until Paul Simon or somebody like that calls. It means I might get a call from a company and they want me to come, if I'd be interested in driving over and checking out a new piece of gear, or something I'm doing tomorrow. In fact, there's no big name associated with it or anything like that, but it keeps you fresh and in front of people, and you're active in your industry still, and you're not just sitting at home waiting for the big fish to bite the hook. It's just staying proactive and being involved. But that keeps your name on the front of the list. And and it's funny how it works. I think we've all experienced it, where somebody asks you if you can recommend somebody for a job, and you sit there and you rack your brain for a few minutes, because wow, I've been doing this so long, I know so many people, and you walk away from that person who was desperate to find a name, and 20 minutes later the perfect person pops back in your head again, and you're like, why didn't I say that while I was standing there? And that's back to that keeping yourself fresh and relevant. If I disappear and go off sailing into the sunset for 6 months and don't talk to anybody, then I'm no longer fresh and on top of everybody's mind when something comes up. And half the things you get recommended for, you don't even know it happened. It happened between 2 sales guys halfway across the country. Your name was thrown around with 3 other people. And in order for that to happen, you had to have recently hung out with one of those sales guys. And I don't mean it like fake it either, by the way, because I don't like hanging out with people I don't like. The beauty of this industry is I like pretty much 99% of the people in this industry. So it makes it real easy to social network. I think if I worked in another industry, I'd have a hard time with it, because I'm not very good at faking having fun at dinner with somebody I don't like. So anyway, I don't know if that helps a little bit. That's or good.
Not. Over to you, Elizabeth. Sorry on that one. So you get the gist of that, right? The networking aspect.
Absolutely, and pretty much I'll just piggyback on what Coach said, because it's spot on. What I want to add to it, especially in my industry, and especially because I've seen some things come in about how women behave in this industry, and there are less women in our industry. One would think that people can be very competitive, and I've found the opposite to be true. And I don't worry about somebody else getting my job. When someone calls, they say in my industry, you can be very proprietary on your lists. When people ask me for my lists, I share them. I don't worry about, there's enough business for all of us. And that attitude has served me immeasurably. First of all, it's just better on your body, not worrying who's going to get it over you. But secondly, I get to be friends with everybody. I don't have people that I have to dislike or worry about, And I think that that attitude is really prevalent, at least around the people that we're all in business with. I love them all. And there's room for everybody. And the woman who gave me my job, we're still dear friends. So that's something else I would support. Don't worry about, competing with each other. See if you can help each other instead. It works out a lot better for everybody. And if you didn't get the job you thought you wanted, there's probably a better one around the corner. So just keep going.
Jesse, want to throw something at that, like the networking aspect and staying in touch and all of that kind of stuff that we touched on already?
Absolutely. Obviously, like, the elephant in the room is that, we're in the crisis that we're in, and hopefully, we'll be able to be going to events where you'll be able to meet people in the near future. I will say this, I put a huge premium on my career advancing the way that it did because I went to South by Southwest basically starting in college. It was if you don't know what South by Southwest is, it's a music and tech and film conference that happens in Austin, Texas for 2 weeks in the month of March. And it's like being in rock and roll and rap and every genre heaven, because every young band is there trying to get heard, and there's tons of label people, there's people with recording studios, there's publicists, and I made a lot of my closest friends just by simply attending South by Southwest, even playing at the festival with small bands. I even tour managed bands at South by Southwest, mixed bands. Whatever I could do, DJ'd, whatever I could do like while I was there was great. The biggest thing for me there was networking, and that network really blossomed from an event like that. And on the audio engineering front, I also make it a point to go to the Audio Engineering Society convention every year, and that I still attend it, and it's a great place to meet people, network, see panels like this, meet the panelists after the panel, and even if someone asks a question in the Q&A, and you thought that question was interesting, talk to that person. Being open, being a people person, like we said, is going to get you a very, it will take you to great depths and lengths in this industry. And then also, I know all of you guys are probably online checking out artists. Don't feel weird emailing a band and tell them that you like them. They're public facing. Their information's out there for a reason. One of the bands that I got that I recorded very early on in my career, even though they didn't go on to like bigger and greater things, but I hold very near and dear to my heart because I love their music. I literally saw them in a venue. This was when MySpace was a thing. I sent the lead singer of the band a message on MySpace telling him how much I loved the band, and then I told him I could record him for free because I was paying for it with my tuition, but I was in recording school. Wound up recording that band and becoming their producer. And actually, the lead singer of that band, this is his old apartment, and it's where I still live. So, the journeys that life takes you on, all from a message that I sent the guy on MySpace.
Cool. Okay, so because I'm looking at the clock and because I've had some managerial experience, I have to make some executive decisions about answering questions or my last topic. I just got a sidebar note from one of my panelists that would like to ask a question about the next topic I'm about to proffer, which is crisis management. I think that it would serve us better. First of all, let me let you all know, these questions you're sending are great. And what I discussed with the panelists before we went onto the broadcast was that we would field emails to take your questions. So I'm seeing nods from all four of us. Yes, we would take an email question, and just you need to promise you won't abuse us and ask lots of questions. So so let me throw this, and I'm going to start with you, Elizabeth, because you agreed to talk about this. So crisis management and failures. What do you do when you know you've screwed up and the screw up or whatever it is, the wheels are still falling off, or something, the glass is still broken on the floor. So in my dealings with Anne, who is at your school, and I have been on your campus, and I love your campus, she heard me say that my cell phone is a fire extinguisher. So just for an example, on a show I did with Paul, that was a very small scale show. It was just him and another guitarist, myself, and his driver. And we were in New York City, and I had one of his guitars, and he had his other guitar, and he walked out of the house without the main guitar. And so I said, Paul, can I call the driver and get him to get the guitar? And he goes, yeah. And he just took the phone out of my own phone out of my hand. He goes, it's behind the couch in the living room. And so, like, to me, that's and so we did the sound check with the B guitar. And then when the A guitar got there, we did the show. So this is the kind of thing. If I freak out and I go, oh my God, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? I don't have my poise to solve the question. I don't have the poise to solve it. And the other thing is, if I had forgotten the guitar and Paul was expecting it, I need to say, I totally screwed up. What do you want to do? And have the artist in the conversation. He can blow his top, he could, whatever he wants to do, but then we're making a decision together about how to solve a problem. So I want to throw this to you because I wrote poise, clear communication, stay in your lane. So if his driver had done something wrong, it's not my business, and I stay out of it, and I don't fuel the fire, and I don't say, I could drive you, I could call a cab. I let it see what's going to happen. And the last is, if you screw up, I wrote here, big boy pants or big kid pants. When you tell the boss there's a problem, that's what you do. You're going to him and you're saying, I screwed up, or there's a problem. What would you like to do? And so you solve the problem together, not always trying to solve the problem first. All right. So I want to start with you, Elizabeth, on this, and we are getting short on time. So let's go like kind of 30-second, 60-second answer if you can.
That's going to be tough, but I'll do it really quickly. I had a client going on Regis when Regis was a big thing. It was his favorite place. We were launching the campaign there. The song is supposed to be 3 minutes long. When we were at the studio, they both had musical directors. The show did, my client did. We get there, they said, did you talk to the client about it being 3 minutes? We'd been on the show maybe 7 times. No, I hadn't. So then I have to go in with my big boy pants, my big girl pants, and say, hi, here's the deal. The song needs to be 3 minutes. The song was an autobiographical song. And he said, I can't cut anything out of this. It's my life story. If they really need to, I'll let them fade me out whenever they want. The producer said, no, I won't do that. You have to cut it. So my client walked. I knew I had to take control of the situation. I called Associated Press, again with my big girl pants on, and I said, hi, here's the deal. I booked my client on the show. I didn't tell him it needed to be 3 minutes long. He walked. This is what happened. We offered this, that, the other. The show refused. I thought my career was over. My priority at the time was what's good for my client in this scenario. I've got to take control of this narrative, and I've got to protect my client. What happens to me is not what's important here. And just keeping a cool head and being of use and service and being able to problem solve in a very heated moment. They were consecutive heated moments. The end result, all the TV shows that were the big at the time offered my client to play the song in its entirety. We had a massive reaction in the press, and where I thought I'd lose clients, and that client and others, I got more business because I acted with integrity, I kept my head, and I took responsibility. That's it.
Okay, Coach, you're up.
Yeah, I think it's just stay calm. I'm a lot more calm with 35, 40,000 people standing around me when something goes wrong with the audio system than I am doing this video conference, for example. So I think that's important for everyone to remember. You're not born with that. You develop it over experience and time. What Elizabeth just said is absolutely true. If you're just a straight shooter, you never have to worry about lying. If you just don't, there's no story to keep straight if you tell the truth and you just deal with it. But remaining calm is important because especially when something's falling apart technically, if you panic, you lose IQ points, and that just prolongs the experience, whatever uncomfortable experience you're in. And you also have to remember it happens to everyone. You're not the first person this has happened to. So there's no reason to panic or beat yourself up too much and solve the problem. A lot of times when you're calm and you come out of these situations, what was like what she just said was going to be a horrible thing turns into something that everybody calls some sort of miracle, that you were able to fix this thing that broke, and you feel guilty and horrible, but in reality, you're praised as a hero. So it's just calm. That's it.
Yeah. Jesse, real quick on the same thing.
Yeah, same thing. Have faith in yourself, calmness, be accepting of the situation, but also be someone that's going to make you know, all parties involved comfortable. Nobody's perfect. Everyone knows that. But if you are going to be the alpha in the situation, everyone's going to, if people are looking to you for answers, be the one that's going to make everyone around you comfortable when trying to steer the choppy waters.
Cool. Thank you. So we need to wrap it up. I wanted, there were really good questions. You guys are asking the right questions. I just answered a Noah question on the chat about the unusual circumstance in Paul's camp of coach doing the touring stuff, and then I do these little like small events. That is highly, highly unusual. And so I answered that, just no, that's very unusual. If you were doing the math on that, you did the math well, Noah. So, so anyway, I have Erica ready to close us out because we only have 3 minutes. Of all the questions that got answered here, and based on the panel being 3 men and 1 woman, I want to make sure we ask this question, because I can tell you my mom would knock me right in the head if I didn't get this question out there. Elizabeth, could you please take a minute to talk about, you know, women in this industry, because it's still male dominated, and it's not that I'm insensitive to it. It's just that that's kind of the nature of it. But I really think it would be good to just have a little mention right from you to everybody here. And there's our clock. So we got to wrap it up soon, but please speak on that to the women in our audience, and all of us for that matter.
In 1 minute, all I can say is if you want to be in this industry, yay, welcome. Just because there's a lot of men in it doesn't mean that's because they're best suited to it. Just pursue it, follow your passions, and we'll welcome you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So I'm guessing everybody here has Erica's email address. Is that true? Is every student here? If you're not, you were invited by one of us to come, and in that case, you do have probably my cell phone also. So if you have a question about what happened here today, ask the question. And don't give up until you get the answer, because maybe it's not the 4 of us or the 6 of us. Get the answers to your questions. That tenacity of answering your question is an important aspect of passion of how you're going to fit yourself in our industry. And when you guys graduate, you're in our industry. You're with us. So, you know, we may be looking to you for work in a year or 2, and, you know, not you looking to us. There was many questions about coming into the industry. We'll take those. So, I want to say that there's no way we were going to hit everything. And the 4 of us have depth that you may not even have heard a little bit of, but that is all part of this. It's just like, we don't accrue a resume to accrue a resume. It's just what we do until we do the next thing. And so, you know, think of it as a voyage. And the last thing I want to tell you, you know, just as a person, and I think you heard 4 people who are people who like being alive, who are enjoying this. Don't forget to develop the rest of your life. Don't get hyper-focused on just this business. Find a hobby. Make sure your relationships with your friends and family are good, you know, and make sure that this isn't the only thing that matters. Be passionate, but really, the people who we work with, they do other things that we talk about when we're not doing the job, or we're sitting having a meal real quick. That matters a lot. So, and it really matters when you're on a tour bus, because you're sick of each other. You'd like to hear a little bit about home. All right, this has been a delight. And I think I speak for the other panelists when I tell you, it's helpful to be of service right now. It's helpful for us to reach back to you guys and be, you know, caring and thoughtful professionally towards you. And so I know I, for one, am grateful for this opportunity, because I didn't have this handed, you know, this kind of panel handed to me, and also the resource of reach out to us. So I want to thank Ann and Erica for making this possible, and the university, and our friend who set up the panel, who's behind the scenes with just a nice little banner from University of New Haven. So a lot of people did a lot of effort to make this happen for you guys. So make sure you may send your appreciation to Ann and Erica as students. Thanks, guys.
And we hope you'll come back in person again.
Yeah, we'll invite you to campus, everyone. Thank you very much.
We'd be
We're all applauding.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.